The views expressed in our ChopTalk podcast are those of the individual participants only and do not necessarily express the views of the Lambda Chi Alpha fraternity or its chapters or members. Our ChopTalk podcasts are intended to be as open and honest with our members as possible, but we acknowledge that certain topics may be sensitive, graphic, or emotionally challenging. Please use your own discretion to avoid any material that you may find potentially painful or difficult.
Hey, Taylor.
Hey, Mike.
How's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm here.
You are here.
Yeah.
Well, they can see us.
Hello.
Hello. We're trying out a video podcast.
We are vodcasting, as some people call it.
Yes, podcasting. How do you feel about that name?
I don't like the name or the concept, actually.
Well, this is great. So, I think that you are the black cat of today. You're the grumpy one.
Yep.
And I will be the golden retriever.
Okay,
Is that cool?
I think we can handle that.
Okay, great. So, as we said, we are doing a podcast, and just bear with us. This is the first time we've done this.
Yes. In all transparency, we have screwed it up. I think we're on time like number 3 now.
We are.
So hopefully this one actually makes it to production. If not, we'll be on 4. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, yeah. At some point, we'll get it.
Yeah, but
Yeah, well,
trial and error.
maybe not. I don't know.
Ever growing. That's what we preach.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, Mike. Thank you. Thank you for your optimism. So you will not see our faces in the podcast.
You will not.
You'll see our little headshots with our audio happening. But you will see our guest, who is Dr. Anthony Bradley.
It is.
He is a great person to talk to. We really enjoyed our conversation with him.
It was fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of get into that a little bit later. But yeah, we were focusing on, the heroic college fraternity, why men need that fraternity aspect and that experience, and just really diving into that aspect of it and how fraternity can really change a man's life. Yeah,
and I think it's really important too, because it's going to be a 3-part series where we'll bring different guests in with Dr. Bradley to really talk about the fraternity experience and how we can put that to the front of people's minds and understand that the fraternity experience can really help build a person, not just in college, but after college.
100%. Yeah. So it's going to be a really cool conversation.
Yeah.
I'm excited for the series too. Mm-hmm. So yeah, let's dive right in, shall we?
Let's do it.
Okay.
And welcome back to the ChopTalk podcast. My name is Michael Covert, joined as always by the lovely Taylor Weitzer.
Hi, hello, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good. Something's different about this.
Something is a little different, yes.
We're on video this time.
We are doing a video. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
This is so exciting.
This is Taylor's idea. I'm not sure how Mike feels about it yet, but we will see how this goes.
That's fair. I mean, if it's a great success, then I will take all the credit.
Please do.
So we are trying out a vodcast, so it's nice to see everyone. You can see us. And we are doing this with one of our guests that I think is going to be super exciting. This is going to be a 3-part series. So we are joined by Dr. Anthony Bradley today to talk about the fraternity experience and how fraternities are kind of shaping America and how college men can kind of save that collegiate experience. So I'm just going to give a quick bio on Dr. Anthony Bradley, just so you guys watching and listening at home know who he is. So Dr. Bradley was most recently a professor of religious studies and director of the Center for the Study of Human Flourishing at the King's College. And so he has now since moved to Kuyper College, and he serves as a distinguished research fellow at the Acton Institute and research professor of interdisciplinary and theological studies. So he is fantastic. He also is the author of our book, if you'd like to show it to our viewers. Yay. So heroic fraternities, and that's kind of where our conversation comes in from the Lambda Chi Alpha side of things. So Dr. Bradley, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that a good place to start for this conversation is, what, in your opinion, why fraternity, at a high level, why is it kind of important or I guess a good decision to go Greek or be in that fraternity from your perspective?
That's a great question. I think from my own experience, I did my undergraduate work at Clemson University. It's
Yeah.
almost football season, so I'm really excited.
Heck yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We came in at number 9. I'm a little salty about that, but whatever.
It's
So
fine.
I was student at Clemson University, and I had a lot of good friends, and I play as Alpha Phi Alpha
Mhm.
at Clemson University. And one of the things I tell people, especially for men in our own age today, is that not just going Greek, but joining a fraternity in particular is one of the best decisions a young man will ever make in his life. Period.
Yeah.
I'll just say that categorically. And in part because of two things. One, fraternities serve as a fantastic place for a man to grow, not just in leadership. We focus so much on that word leadership, but
Mhm.
also, and I would say more deeply, for a man to grow in his character. If you look at the history of fraternities, that's really what they were intended to do, was to help young men develop their character so they could be the types of people who would lead ethically, an
Right.
ethical life. And that's really important for leadership. And for me, I think our country needs some ethical men.
Mhm.
We need some men who are characterized by things like, I don't know, loyalty and duty and respect and service and honor and integrity, personal courage, just as
Ooh.
an example.
Those are sounding familiar. I don't know why.
Yeah, if it sounds familiar, I'm not sure why it sounds familiar to you all, but I will say this: we are lacking that in this country.
Mhm.
If you look at our political leaders, our business leaders, across the various marketplace spheres that we have, that's what we're lacking.
Yeah.
Whenever you see a politician fall, whenever you see a business person fall, it's because they lack those sorts of virtues. They don't have this sort of vision and mission in life. So I'm fairly confident and excited about the fact that fraternities, especially ones that have really solid values like this one does, is the kind of thing that we need for the country. And I think if men really invest in each other in building these sort of ethical values, the leadership part will automatically come. In fact, I'll say it this way: insofar as the chapter builds and focuses on the ethical dimensions of character,
Mhm.
it by definition will produce leaders,
Yeah.
because those are the men on any college campus who will rise to the top. And not only that, when they graduate and they get a job at any company, they're going to rise to the top. If they become a lawyer, they're going to rise to the top. If they
Mhm.
work in the STEM field, they're going to rise to the top. These are the sorts of things that men need. And I'll say this lastly here: if you're not in a fraternity, it's not going to happen. It's
Yeah.
just not going to happen. There is no other context outside of maybe the military,
Mhm.
outside of some good team sports programs at some really good schools, that men might get this.
Mhm.
But the only other context where a man is going to have another group of men invest in him to make him better, to form his virtues and character, and give him an opportunity to practice those, is in a fraternity.
Mhm.
So join a fraternity, again, by definition, is the best decision a man's going to make in college, especially if it's one that focuses on the ethical life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great perspective.
Yeah, and reading your book, there's one theme I think you focus on quite a bit, and I think it's super fascinating.
Mhm.
Is you can have an organization with the best values in the world and have a great representation, but it depends on the man in which they recruit.
Mhm.
And the thing that you really hone in on is self-serving, self-preserving, and self-centered when you talk about the type of men that don't belong in these organizations. And I think that's very fascinating because it's so true. Like, from my work here at Lambda Chi Alpha, when I was an undergraduate in Lambda Chi Alpha, that's one of the things that I've definitely noticed was when you start bringing those type of people who are self-serving, preserving, and self-centered, the quality of the organization starts going down significantly compared to when you have more of an idealistic approach to recruiting people. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that's the road to getting suspended.
Mhm.
Right.
Right? You're asking to get suspended when you bring in men who aren't great men.
Right.
One of the ways when I speak to fraternities at the local level, I say, listen, you want to look for guys during the rush process who have great potential.
Mhm.
Right? You don't want the guy who's like the coolest, or who might be the most impressive outwardly. You want the guy who's sort of in the process of growth,
Right.
because that's the man who's going to be honed and shaped by the vision and values of the fraternity. You don't want a guy who's like, no, I already understand it. I got it. I don't really need this. I'm here, right, because of what the fraternity can do for me.
Yeah.
You want the kind of guy who's like, no, I'm here because I want to make the fraternity better.
Right.
I want to make
Absolutely.
my brothers better. I want to invest in other people. And I can tell you right now, if any chapter who pledges someone who is self-centered and self-preserving and overly self-interested, you're going to get suspended. That's just a fact. That's the guy who's going to do something really stupid and put the entire chapter in jeopardy because he only cares about himself. He's not putting his brothers first.
Right.
Right. So think about it this way. Let's say that you've got a group of guys who are maybe at a party, or they're doing some kind of recreational activity on campus, or they're involved in something else on campus. They should be thinking this way. How does our behavior make our fraternity look? How does my behavior in the classroom, outside the classroom, speak to and present my chapter on this campus and off the campus? Let's say you're traveling on spring break and you have your fraternity stuff on, right? You're asking this question: what does our behavior say to other people about the kind of men that we are in this fraternity? If someone is self-centered and self-preserving, right, and really focused just on themselves, they're not asking that question. They don't really care, and they're not going to put the needs of the chapter and the fraternity above their own.
Right.
They're really in it for themselves, and you don't want those guys. Those guys are going to get you suspended. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
100%. And you also, one of the things that also stood out to me, sorry that I keep referencing the book, but you talked about the type of people that you surround yourself with, whether it's was it trust, must, just, or rust, right? Those four different qualifications of person, somebody who you trust in, they're like your confidant, the person you go to for the good and the bad. And then you have the next group of people who's kind of people you lean on, but they're not kind of the person that you tell everything to. And then there's that person maybe you haven't seen for a while that when you connect, it's like you haven't really left and you pick up where you left off. And then you have kind of the other member, right? Somebody that you're acquaintances with, but you didn't really spend much time with while you're in the chapter. And I think it's really interesting because I think a lot of times we recruit people based on what's going to give us the highest social status on campus, instead of recruiting the person who's going to be the best man standing next to me when I'm married in 10 years. And so I think that's a mistake that a lot of our chapters make.
Absolutely. One of the things that I tell chapters when I speak to them is those rankings are irrelevant on campus, right? You see them on various websites.
Oh yeah.
Right. They rank those are not just irrelevant. I think they're stupid. Right. I'll go so far because they just don't matter.
Right.
So you can think about it this way. The fraternity that is excelling at living out its vision and mission and values, that's the number one fraternity on the campus.
Right.
Right.
I agree.
So the only basis of comparison of the chapter is itself. If it's better than it was last year and the year before that, and the year before that, right? If there's sort of a trajectory of improvement, right? You're getting better and better and better and better at fulfilling the vision and mission and values of the fraternity. You're rocking it. You're killing it.
Yeah.
Because if you think about the values, I mean, I really love this fraternity's values, right? Loyalty and duty, respect, service, honor, integrity, personal courage, etc.
Right.
And think about the way it's written, that it's formed in a way that you're encouraging and supporting each other in the pursuit of those things.
Yes. 100%.
It is impossible. It is absolutely impossible for a chapter on any campus that is excelling in those values to not be the number one chapter on their campus, because they're going to be adding value to their brothers, and they're going to be benefiting the entire campus.
Yes, absolutely.
So this is the basis of forming those relationships that last for a lifetime.
Yep.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so you want to invite guys into something huge, like the history of these values, the history of this mission. And you're right, these are not only the guys you're going to be standing next to in your wedding, they're also going to be at your 50th birthday party.
Right.
They're also going to be at your own children's weddings.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, your kids might marry each other.
Right.
And
exactly.
listen, I was just at the 40th reunion of my chapter at Clemson University, and I can tell you it was like magic to watch a bunch of 40, 50, 60-year-old men return back to campus and behave. yeah. And behave with excitement and joy at the reunion of being back together in the same room.
Yes.
I mean, we showed up to each other, and it was immediate. It was immediate laughter and affection and joy and happiness. And you're right. It's almost, the conversations picked off right where they left off.
Yeah.
The jokes picked off right where they left off.
Absolutely.
Right. And those are those sort of rust relationships. Those are the sort of deep relationships. And that's what you forge in a brotherhood over 3 to 4 years. You find those guys that you're going to do life with. I'll give you another great example here to wrap up this thought. One of the brothers in my fraternity, and these are guys are in their late 40s, early 50s, right? Lost his job. He got laid off. And what did he do? He called a brother in the fraternity when we were all at Clemson around the same time. He called him and he said, "Hey man, I lost my job. He got laid off." It's one of these things where the company got bought out and they reduced the size of the employees, things like that. So he didn't get fired. He just it was a reorganization.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And within 2 weeks, he had another job that his fraternity brother got him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Right. Now, these are the kind of stories as I travel across the country and I talk to alumni and I talk to current students. These are the kind of stories that you hear. This is common. And so this is forged, right? This is the beauty of being in a brotherhood where it's not just about the 4 years.
Yes. 100%.
Right. Like it's not just about the 4 years. It's about forming a network of friends and brothers who are going to encourage you and support you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and I think that you hit it right on the head, and that's what we preach, especially with Lambda Chi Alpha, that it's not for 4 years, it's for a lifetime, right? And I think hearing those stories of these men coming back together, and it might have been after 2 years, 10 years, however many years, and they're still able to pick up where they left off. It's a really cool experience and relationship that we're seeing. And I think kind of going off of that relationship piece, going back to your book, you talk about this idea of why men need a tribe, right? And that tribe aspect. And so can you expand on that and kind of what that means to you and what brotherhood in general means to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So listen, everybody needs a group of people to encourage them, support them, to love them and care about them, everybody. In fact, we're social beings. We're born into a family. We're born into a community.
Right.
You're raised in a family, in a neighborhood, in a school, maybe a church. You're surrounded by community. And the idea that, well, when you get to college, you're good. You're just kind of on your own and you can make it on your own. And it's actually not true. You can make it when you know that people have your back. Right. And so everybody needs a tribe. Everybody needs a group of guys that they know has their back. When I talk to fraternity brothers across the country in different fraternities, that's one of the things they say that really drew them to Greek life is they are finally in a place where a group of guys has their back. Now, here's why it's important to know that a group of guys is going to encourage you and support you and have your back no matter what. It makes you more confident about two things. One, who you are as a man, because you're loved and accepted, not on the basis of what you do, but just because of who you are. Your brothers are going to love you and accept you and care about you and encourage you. And they want what's best for you, not because you have this sort of magical awesomeness about you, it's because they want to, because they're
Right.
your friends, right? And secondly, and this may be even more important, it also gives you confidence to take risks.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that important? Because if you don't take risks, if you don't face discomfort on purpose, you're never going to grow.
Yeah.
And so it allows you to take risks and do things that might be dangerous, and I mean properly dangerous,
Right.
right? But also puts you in a position to fail.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the awesome thing about a fraternity, is that you can fail and it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't change your social status. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't change what people think of you. And so you can take a risk, and if you fail at that risk, the guys have your back.
Yes.
So ask the girl out. You might get dumped, but get back on the horse because the guys are going to support you.
Right.
Apply for the internship, get rejected, they're going to still support you.
Right.
Apply for the job, get rejected, they're still going to support you.
Yes.
Or the opposite, get engaged, they're going to support you and celebrate you. They're going to be at your wedding.
Right.
Get the internship, they're going to post it all over Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
Get the job, they're going to post it as well. So it works both ways. And this really gives a guy a lot of confidence to do great things, because we can't do great things alone.
Mm-hmm.
And to know that you're going to spend a life having a group of brothers who are going to make sure that you succeed and cheer you on really does give a guy that kind of confidence. And so it's just really important, I think, that we take advantage of those opportunities and try to get as many men in these contexts as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I want to bring up that I think it made me think of this from what you were saying, Anthony, but I feel like the fraternity is very much like an experiment for real life, you know? And so I think you said it exactly right, of this is a place where you can take that opportunity, or, you know, run for that office, and maybe you don't get it, or maybe it's out of your comfort zone, but you're doing it because you know that if you fail, it's okay, and you have the support of your brothers behind you. So I think that that's a huge point to make, of this is your support system, and, you know, you should be able to grow and learn because you know that they will have your back. So I think that's so great and so well said.
Yeah, and it's not that it's necessarily sort of a laboratory for real life. I mean, it is real life.
Right.
Right. And here's what I mean. Guys have real depression.
Mm-hmm.
They have real anxiety. They have real addictions.
Mm-hmm.
They have real pain. They have real brokenness.
Right.
And to walk through life, right? Parents getting divorced, siblings dying,
Mm-hmm.
struggling with things. Having a level of support with your brothers is the birthplace, I think, of being vulnerable enough to ask for help. And if you're vulnerable enough to ask for help, you're actually putting yourself on the road to success, because if you're vulnerable enough to be open to ask for help on those things, then those things don't define you.
Yeah.
So whenever I see a 40, 50-year-old guy who ruins his life or ruins his career because of his own mistakes, or he makes decisions out of his own pain and it hurts other people, I automatically know this is the guy that doesn't have any friends. And hasn't really had any friends. It doesn't have any close friends. So,
Yeah.
I mean, those are the things that I think that universities don't really understand sometimes, and sometimes administrators get that wrong. And I will say this for a fact: the movie industry gets this 100% wrong.
Yes.
Because this is what they don't depict this side of fraternity life when guys are actually up at 2 a.m. crying to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
They don't depict the side of fraternity life where a guy's parents are getting divorced and he's a wreck and he needs his brothers to support him, or his grandmother dies or something like that. I mean, that's
Right.
the level of real life stuff. And this is, in one sense, I mean, this is the beginning of being an adult in a real sense.
Yeah.
Because I hate to say this in terms of the bad news, this is what life is. Like, life is struggle.
It is.
It is totally.
And I'll tell any college student this: if you think that you can get through a life of struggle by yourself, you're a fool.
Yeah.
You're an absolute fool. And so these are relationships that you're given for the sake of making sure that you succeed with a life that's hard, just categorically hard. It just really is hard, but it's not impossible. And the closer you are to your brothers, the more successful you're going to be in navigating some of those difficult things.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that something that you just touched on, which was, one of my other questions, was kind of that perception that we get of Greek life or fraternities in the media, and I think that recently there has been an increase of positive. So what comes to my mind is the Queer Eye episode.
Oh yeah.
With our New Orleans chapter, and there was a scene that I think those of us who've watched the episode will immediately think of is the campfire scene. So all of them are together around a campfire, and that's the first time they're truly kind of being vulnerable with each other. And I think what blows my mind is some of them say, oh man, I didn't know that you were going through that. Like, this is the first time we've opened up and talked about that. And it was truly beautiful. And, everyone I've talked to who's watched it said the same thing. But I think there are still a lot of, misconceptions, negative perceptions about Greek life and fraternities. So, in your opinion, Anthony, how do we kind of combat that with all of this great stuff that fraternities are doing?
That's a fantastic question. I think that unfortunately Hollywood is the enemy here in part, and the news media. One of the things that's true, and this is one of the reasons that I think people think I'm crazy to write a book saying that the solution to America's boy crisis and the men and boy crisis in America is getting as many men in fraternities as possible. Is that people don't like it. Right. They think fraternities are represent the worst of masculinity. They think that they are fundamentally toxic.
Right.
And there's sort of a couple of things that I really want to emphasize the chapters. One is just really simple, is be careful how you present yourself on social media.
100%.
I'm following right now about 2,500 chapters or so on social media.
Wow.
And it is so fascinating to watch the recruitment videos.
Yes.
Okay. Because
yes.
I'm like, gentlemen, you have to think strategically here. I know that you're trying to recruit guys
right
to come to a Rush event. I get that. But what are you communicating about what's important in the life and culture of your chapter based on the video that you produce during Rush? That's really important. So I'll say it this way. Your Rush video should be consistent with the vision and mission of the fraternity. Right? Your Rush video should not look like a clip from a stupid Zac Efron movie about fraternity life. It shouldn't look like that.
Right.
Right? Because that's the sort of thing that perpetuates a stereotype. Right? And then secondly, so first of all, just be careful about your public presence on social media. But then secondly, just be great at being your fraternity. It's really that simple. Yeah. Be absolutely excellent men on your campus. I think sometimes we focus so much on the fraternity culture and their exposure off campus. But I really want chapters to think about how they're presenting themselves on campus.
Yes.
On campus to a wide range of stakeholders at a university. For example, the administration, professors, independents, women, parents, etc. Right?
Yeah.
And again, I'm just convinced, and people may call me crazy on this, if the fraternity focuses on its own values and vision and mission, it will draw people. Because our society right now one of the things that I've noticed is that guys want to be great men, but they don't know how.
Right. Yeah.
They don't know what the values are. They don't know the pathway to doing that. They're just on their own. And to have a fraternity that has a very clear mission statement, very clear vision, very clear values, it provides that pathway, and you have to let people see that.
Yes.
Right? Because that's what really matters in the long run. So if we think about it kind of nationally, if all the Lambda Chi Alpha chapters were committed, if all of them were committed together to being the best of themselves, those are the sorts of things that contribute to this to redirecting the stereotype. Because people will say, "Man, I mean, I had this vision of what fraternities were like, but you guys aren't like that at all." Right. They're like, "Well, I thought fraternities would do X, but you guys do Y. I mean, it's really great, but I thought it was something different."
Right.
And you might ask them, and it'll beg the question, how come you guys aren't like what I saw in the movies, or you guys aren't like what I saw in the news?
Yes.
Exactly.
And what it does, right, it gives them an opportunity to explain the vision and the mission and the history of why these things actually matter, and the kind of men that they create. Right.
Yeah.
That's when you start to pull forth some of the great alumni and some of the things that they've done in the history of the fraternity, but also in the country. And we just need to do more of that. Right.
100%.
Because the phrase, right? Haters, the haters are gonna hate, right? Right. That's the phrase, right?
Right. It is.
But listen, you can't hate excellence. There'll be nothing to say.
Yep, exactly.
Right? You can't hate on loyalty and respect and duty. There's nothing to hate on.
Right.
So I tell chapters, you have to put yourselves in positions where if someone were to try to slander your chapter, everyone would think they're stupid.
Right.
Right? Because you're like, well, that's not what I see on our campus. That's
Yeah.
not what I see. So obviously the person who's trying to proffer and advance the stereotype is obviously wrong. And so for chapters to think about this way, what can we do to pledge the type of men that are going to make our chapter more consistent with its vision and mission and values, thereby making us the most excellent example of what it means to be in Greek life on our campus?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I have a question for you, and I guess it's kind of a two-part question. Number one, like, what inspired you to write this book about fraternities? Right, I think we are really bad at marketing ourselves positively. So having books like this come out not only show the good and the bad, but show why we're trying to improve. So yeah, first of all, like, what was the inspiration, and second of all, have you gotten any pushback from people after writing the book?
Thank you so much for that question. I teach a class on the history of masculinity in America.
Oh, cool.
And part of that class was a focus on the history of college fraternities, which is kind of chapter 3 of the book.
Right.
And at some point, I can't remember exactly when this was, 'cause I started working on this project more directly about 5 years ago. So I sort of been a long haul project for me.
Right.
And as I began to look at fraternities, I just noticed in the news cycle that fraternities were getting suspended. So one day, I'll never forget this. I put either suspended fraternity or fraternity suspension into Google, in quotation marks, and I clicked search, and the page just blew up. And then I noticed this is before COVID broke out. Every single week, once a week, somewhere in the country, a fraternity was getting suspended every single week. And I'm thinking,
that's wild.
What is going on?
Right.
Like, something is wrong. Something is wrong when every single week and somewhere across the country, a fraternity chapter is getting suspended.
Yeah.
And that really began me to sort of start asking questions about the book project. And the second part of this, and this really hit home, is when I realized, and I saw this with some of my own college students as well, is that our entire country misunderstands young men, and the assumption that men are just toxic is just not true.
Yeah.
The assumption that fraternity men are always bad is not true, because one of the things that I noticed is a lot of pain. I saw a lot of anxiety issues, depression. I saw a lot of suicide. I saw a lot of drug addiction, drug abuse. I saw a lot of drug overdoses in Greek life. And I thought, okay, something's really up.
Right.
And that was the beginning of me kind of doing the deep dive and saying, all right, so we have all these problems, but I believe that the institution to solve all these issues is in Greek life. And interestingly, I thought I was going to get a lot of pushback. I thought it was going to be really controversial, but what I've gotten worse is silence.
Ooh,
interesting.
Okay.
Right. So I was expecting the book to be attacked, and
Sure.
like how dare someone promote fraternities because they make campuses better. College presidents don't want them around. And as I've traveled across the country, as I've sent the book to journalists, I haven't gotten pushback. I've just gotten ignored and a lot of silence. And I've sent the book to deans of students across the country. I've sent it to there's free copies, right? Just sort of promoting the book, and they say nothing. And I think in part that silence is that a lot of universities just want fraternities to be less bad.
Right.
They don't want them to be crucibles that produce greatness. They don't want to promote them. They don't want to see them grow. They want them gone.
Interesting. Okay.
And I'm saying we need more fraternities on more campuses and more chapters.
Yeah.
Right? We need a Lambda Chi Alpha chapter on every college in America that is focusing on this vision and this mission and these values. We need it on every single college campus, right?
Yeah.
Because men are struggling, and I think fraternities are the biggest solution. But people don't want to admit that. And more broadly, I think so much of our culture, and I think this is the last part I'll say here on the silence part. They've just given up on guys. They've just thrown in the towel on guys. They just don't care anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, 61% of all college freshmen this year are women. Women now constitute the majority of all bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and doctorates, right? The graduation rates for boys are declining at the high school level. Guys are disappearing. We've got about 9 million men between the age of 24 and 54 who aren't working right now. They're just sort of doing nothing. They're not in trades. They're not in school. They're doing nothing. And people just don't care. They just really don't care. And so it's a sort of apathy about the lives of young men that introduces and creates the context of silence. So I'm sitting in the corner, right? I'm on an island by myself saying, hey, what about the guys? Like actually, if you think that young guys are the problem, I want you to know they're actually the solution.
Right.
And if we invest in these young men, we actually will be on the road to solving some of our deepest problems on the university campus, but also in America.
Yeah.
I think you're right. And not to jump on the train of talking about universities, but quickly, I wanted to say that one of the things we've noticed is that campuses in general are just providing less support for fraternities and sororities across the board.
Yeah.
Or you see people who are completely new to the field become a sorority fraternity advisor, which is great, but they don't have the context to what a Greek system can do. And so, I think we're just in general just overlooking that key element, right? Like it's not about donation dollars. It's not about student engagement dollars. It's about the individual you're developing and then sending into the workforce, sending into the family force, right? Like we want to build great people all around, not just a good student, right? Like we want a good student, but we want them to also be a well-rounded individual that we can send in the community knowing that they're going to do great things.
Yeah, it really is about the formation aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what makes fraternities great. And if you look at the history of fraternities in terms of when they began, that's what it was about.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Taking men in these formative years and putting them in a context where they can grow and then be sent back in the community to make it better.
Right.
100%.
This was part of an initiation process, right?
Mm-hmm.
You remove a man from his comfort, family, things like that.
Right.
You put obstacles and challenges in front of him where he discovers what he's good at. His confidence goes up. He has a vision for his role to play in society. And then you send him back in to society to help it thrive and flourish, for him to orient himself towards service, to make that sort of contribution.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of universities, you're right, they aren't offering support because they want to see them gone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sort of, quote unquote, starving the beast, if you will. I mean, they want to just increase the punitive measures, right? So more rules, more regulations to make it more difficult to be Greek. And then the chapters will disaffiliate. They'll go off in the corner somewhere off campus, and their numbers will dwindle down, and they'll just eventually fade away and die. That's what a lot of universities just want.
Yeah.
And I'm making the argument that we should be doing the absolute opposite.
Right.
We should be
100%.
investing more money in Greek life and giving them more status and more access to more students on campus. Because if it's done right, and if it's done well, it's the best formation opportunity for a man on campus or a woman in a sorority outside of sports and military that you can get in that age group.
Right.
Right. It's such a unique experience that, you don't get from other experiences. And I think that, what we've been talking about, kind of this dip and decline in men attending college and all of that, is something that I want to get into more in the second part of this series when we talk with our CEO Troy Medley, because he's very passionate about that, of seeing our men succeed and be in a place where they are supported on college campuses. So more to come on that. But Anthony, I would love, your kind of bottom line, so what is our takeaway about fraternities and, how they can save men and how those men can then, save universities in America?
So the way I'm framing the project is heroic fraternities and maybe more specifically heroic masculinity.
Yeah.
And this is men who use their power and their presence and their creativity, their ingenuity, right, their passions, their strengths for the benefit of their brothers and those around them.
Right.
And to think about being a man as someone who uses all the good capacities that one has for the benefit of your brothers and everyone else that you come in contact with, that's what makes fraternity life great. And I think that's what's going to make campuses even better and the country better. Yeah. And I think the extent to which we focus on building capacity in men to be great, building capacity in these young men to have their strengths focus on serving other people, to have their ingenuity and creativity focused on that, for them to not be self-serving, right? And self-orientated, but to really see that there's a mutuality in us being focused on serving each other, because in doing so, we make each other better.
Yes.
And so I think if fraternities are really serious, and I think if chapters are really serious about the opportunity that they have to take great men and make them the greatest men ever, right? To take really good men, right? To take guys who come in as freshmen who want to improve themselves and then provide them a way to do that and practice that with all the ups and downs and blood, sweat, and tears that comes with that. I think we'll have better colleges in this country We'll have better marriages in this country. We'll have better fathers in this country. We'll have better businesses and better neighborhoods and better politics as well, because the men who lead the country historically come from Greek life. That's just a fact.
Right.
I think I covered that in chapter 1 or 2.
Yeah,
but that's just a
100%.
fact, right? And so if we can really address these men who are the future shapers and leaders of the society, I'm hopeful and I'm excited about how much better our country is going to be, because men invest their lives in fraternities like Lambda Chi Alpha.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Well, I think that, this is a great point to stop for this part of the series. As I mentioned, we will be getting into it more with Troy Medley in our next part. But Dr. Bradley, I just want to thank you so much again for doing this series with us. I think this is so important to talk about, and a very important lens that we are taking, and how Lambda Chi Alpha is helping shape these men. So thank you again so much for being here, and we can't wait for part 2.
Yeah, and I want to say too, like, as a fraternity man, I want to say thank you for actually addressing a topic that I think a lot of people want to address but don't have maybe the ability or the know-how or the drive to address. I think this is a topic that needs to be heard across the world, especially the United States. I think we need to encourage and embrace the development of these men.
Yes.
If we want to see our country exist in the future.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you again so much, Dr. Bradley. And like I said, we're excited for part 2 and 3. And so we will pick up there when we have it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that was a fun conversation.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that we could all see Dr. Bradley.
Yeah, it was great.
You couldn't see us,
No.
but it's fine.
We get little floating heads.
Right, exactly. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
So shout out to our associate Thomas for making that happen, because we were honestly scratching our heads on how this would all come together.
Yes, and we're still working on it.
Yeah, exactly.
One of these days, you will see us through the whole podcast. I have faith.
I do too. One way or another, we'll figure it out. But yeah, it was a really great conversation. I think talking to Dr. Bradley and seeing how he is such an advocate for Greek life is really refreshing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I found it really interesting too, like talking to him. And in his book too, he talks about self-serving, self-preserving, and self-centered individuals are really what brings down a chapter, because they're looking out for number one first, which is themselves, instead of maybe looking at the collective and understanding that it's a group effort to make these function. So I think hearing his perspective on a lot of those things was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that he hit on that was my biggest takeaway was the idea that we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to other organizations, but really just comparing ourselves to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And if we are growing as Lambda Chi Alpha members, and as an organization based on what we say we're going to do and our morals and that kind of that moral compass, that's all that we need to worry about.
Oh, 100% agree.
Yeah.
These antiquated tiered systems that everyone follows on college campuses are just, what are they for, really? And I think he helps guide us to an answer on that question is nothing, right? Like, you should compare yourselves to yourselves.
Right.
Like, are you being your best self today? If not, do better.
Exactly. And I think that's just like a personal
I think so.
concept that we can all kind of, take from as well.
Definitely.
But yeah, I think that it was really, really cool to sit down with him. We mentioned his book a lot, which is Heroic Fraternities, which you can find on Amazon. It's a great read.
It is.
It's a very easy read.
Yeah.
But just understanding more about, what the college man is looking for, how they benefit from all of this. And he just really is a great proponent for the fraternity experience.
100% agree.
Yeah, so in our part 2 of this series, we will be bringing on our CEO, Troy Medley, and just talking about kind of the higher ed landscape as it is right now. So that's going to be a really interesting conversation, I think, too, to kind of get the back and forth between the two of them. So that will be coming out soon. So we hope that you really enjoyed this conversation. We hope you come back for parts 2 and 3. And we promise we will get this podcasting down
soon.
At some point. Soon. I'm not going to put a date to it.
There's no date or time.
We just soon.
Yes.
Just soon. But it's been fun. So thank you, Mike, for joining me on this journey.
Yeah. So on behalf of myself, Taylor, and everyone here at the Office of Administration, thanks for listening.
Bye.